A man and a woman meet at a friend's wedding and develop a nice banter, and the man gets enough courage to ask the woman for her phone number, and eventually asks her on a date. The woman is named Janine, and the man is named Scooter, but everyone calls him Jared. Your beauty speaks to something deep in the very fiber of my soul. You're attractive too, I guess. That's like half the reason I'm doing this, though. You're very attractive. They date for about 9 months in the typical way that their relationships had gone in the past. It's not the fairy tale romance that Janine had envisioned as a child she would be involved in at this point in her life, but she's in her mid-30s and has a limited window of time before she can't have children anymore, so they decide to get married. Okay, so when a female and a male have sexual intercourse with the intention of reproducing a child, the male gamete, or sperm, and the female gamete, the egg or ovum, meet in the female's reproductive system. When the sperm fertilizes, or meets the egg, this fertilized egg is called the zygote. The zygote goes through a process of becoming an embryo and developing into a fetus. This is how Richard was born. Janine and Jared were alright parents, but it became very obvious early on that they got married a little too fast and didn't even completely know each other before they had a kid. Then Jared got real unhappy, but he couldn't manifest the change in his life that he probably needed. I came from a very traditional Catholic family who didn't really believe in ever getting divorced. Plus I've got a kid now and stuff. I'm in way too deep. That'd be a mess. Oh God. Oh God. I thought that being a mother would finally make some things in my life make sense, but now I'm a mother and it doesn't really feel like anything changed, like internally. One day she was sitting on a rocking chair holding a crying Richard, and she realized that her whole life she was waiting for some point, or age, or event, or achievement, or future version of herself, and suddenly everything will make sense. And then she got there and realized that everything just keeps going. She learned the secret that this eventual point that she was expecting to get to doesn't exist, and this road goes on forever. And she needs to be okay with right now. She looked down at Richard's pained expression as he wailed, and she started to cry uncontrollably for reasons unknown to herself. The two of them sat there in the rocking chair weeping for a few minutes before Richard calmed down and Janine put him to bed. She woke up the next morning next to Jared feeling just fine. Nothing immediately changed about the way she lived her life. Richard had a pretty unremarkable childhood, like most white suburban American children. He got read the book The Giving Tree when he was 6 and fell in love with poetry. He'd eventually want to be a famous poet. I want to be a famous poet! He went through elementary school with his little group of friends who teased him and made him feel bad a lot of the time, but he eventually forgot most of them soon after he moved on to middle school, where stuff got real weird. He'd looked at a pornographic magazine once in grade 5, but suddenly puberty kicked in with a fury, and he was irresistibly compelled to want to fertilize the eggs of his teachers and classmates to create zygotes. He started lashing out against his parents. Richard, would you like some toast? God, leave me alone. I hate you. Why aren't you as cool as Mom? I can't wait to move out. I thought that having a son would be cool, but I guess that's just because I imagined you as being a younger version of myself. Now I realize that you are your own person with dreams and insecurities of your own. An experience completely independent of mine. Despite this disconnect, if you would make an effort to try to spend more time with me and understand me, I will try to do the same for you. You're stupid and I wish you made more money. I don't want to go to church anymore. Hair started growing in places he didn't want them to. He tried to talk to girls but realized he had no idea how to get them to like him, and he found it easier just to not go for it in fear of change or rejection. He then got to high school and everything changed. When he met Olga. Freshman year, he just admired her from a distance when he passed her in the hallway, trying not to be creepy about it, glancing at her from the corner of his eye for a second and then looking away. He hoped she didn't notice. He wanted to say something to her one day, but he had no direct reason to and didn't have the courage to spit out some dumb line or tell her he wants to make zygotes. It's not like it took up a lot of mental headspace at that time, but sometimes he'd visualize little scenarios where he'd actually go up and say some perfectly natural thing that would make her laugh, and where they'd hit it off and she thinks he's super funny and cool. Then he'd realize how sad that is. Sophomore year, they happened to have biology together, and on the first day, they were placed in the same little two-person table thing that are in science rooms. He finally decided to act. Hey, what's your name? Olga. Man, what an ugly name. Jesus, I didn't even think people were named Olga in real life. He thought about just calling the whole thing off right there, but it turned out they had a nice little banter and you could make her laugh and stuff, and it was real cute. Richard asked Olga if she wanted to hang out and see the film Wild Hogs, cause it's 2007 and stuff, and she said yes. So then they're watching Wild Hogs in the theater, and Richard picked her up in Jared's old pickup and paid for her ticket and popcorn and stuff. They just sort of sit there in silence for like 20 minutes, kind of awkwardly. At a certain point, Richard turns to her and is like, man, this is really bad. And she's like, yeah, I kinda was hoping it would be funnier. And he was like, I mean, it's a comedy, I guess we could have seen Blades of Glory. I thought about 300, but that would be a bad move on a first date. And then she was like, I would have seen 300. And he was like, you just want to see guys with six-packs wearing thongs. And then she giggled, and he was momentarily proud of getting her to laugh, because he's not usually good in high-pressure scenarios. But then she's like, wait, did you say first date? And he realizes that he should have said something cool, but he just shrugged his head and looked a little embarrassed. Throughout the rest of the movie, they would play a little game where he'd turn to look at her for a second, and then look back at the screen when she'd look at him, and then she'd do it, and so on. There was a moment where they both turned to look at each other at the same time and kind of stared awkwardly for a second before they both looked away. Then Richard looked at Olga again, and she looked back at him, and instead of turning away, he goes in for the kiss. And that was that, but then later in the movie he does it again, and they start like making out. And I'm not going to be graphic, but they were like really going for it, and neither of them had any idea what they were doing. It was just like saliva and tongue and popcorn crumbs. It was a mess, let me tell you. On the way home, he asked Olga if she ever noticed him freshman year, and she said, yeah, you would always stare at me. I always thought you were going to say something, but you never did. He was really embarrassed. Despite the kissing being a little awkward, they both had a really nice time. Olga didn't mention the kissing to anyone, and Richard would literally tell all of his friends and everyone he knew and think about it all the time. Okay, so I spent a really long time on the dumb stuff, so I gotta wrap it up. Basically, Olga and Richard date for sophomore and junior year, and he does all the life coming of age stuff. You've seen it. But the summer before senior year, Olga has to move away to New York because her dad got a really good job there. It's real sad and heartbreaking for everybody. Shortly after, Richard inexplicably got pancreatic cancer and died in a hospital room at the age of 19. The end.